Good evening, everyone. This is Dari on WorldStreams Radio. Thank you to our listeners from all around the world for joining us tonight. To learn more about WorldStreams Radio, visit our website, worldstreams.org. You can also find us now on Facebook at facebook.com/WorldStreams. Our guests tonight are Nicholas Cords and Eric Jacobson of Brooklyn Rider. Brooklyn Rider is a genre-defying string quartet that employs creative programming and exciting collaborations to illuminate music in innovative ways. Their desire to extend the borders of the conventional string quartet has been through their long-standing participation in Yo-Yo Ma's Silk Road Ensemble. They've performed throughout the world and recorded 3 albums for Sony Classical. And it's a pleasure to have Nicholas and Eric with us tonight. Hello, Saeed. Hello and welcome, Nicholas and Eric.
Hi. Thanks so much for having us.
Well, hello, Dari, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, to all our listeners from around the world. Good evening to you, Nicholas and Eric Jacobson and Nicholas Cords of Brooklyn Rider. Nicholas, what can you tell us about this piece we just heard?
Well, the piece you just heard was written by one of our dear quartet members, in fact, and Colin Jacobson, and whose younger brother you're talking to on the phone, Eric, and that was Colin and Eric playing, and basically that was a duet from a piece called Achilles' Heel.
Wonderful. And your band has 4 members, right? Yeah, continue.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we definitely have a 4-member string quartet, and in fact, that piece has kind of a suite of different movements, and it moves between the first piece, which is Lydia's Reflection, with 2 people. The next piece has 3 people, and finally, by the third movement, we get to all 4. So it's kind of an introduction of the different members of Brooklyn Rider. And the piece is written, the name is kind of a play on words in a sense.
Yes.
Lydia's Reflection is also referring to the kind of musical mode that it's written in, which is an ancient Greek mode, I think, called the Lydian mode. And Colin wrote that for himself and his brother Eric.
Wonderful. Now, when Achille is very much also has a connection with the music. Achille is the middle name of Debussy, correct?
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, how did you decide? And Eric or Nicholas could jump in any time to answer this question. Why did you decide that Debussy's music would be something for you to actually write about?
Well, I feel, this is Eric, I feel that Debussy, as we've talked about, Nick and I actually have spent some time talking about the fact that Debussy himself was really looking outside of the box in his time, which was, 100 years ago or so. And the experiences that Debussy had in his lifetime sort of went to add to his music, and he really was someone who incorporated everything from around him. The story goes that Debussy went to a World's Fair in Paris, and at that World's Fair he had the privilege to hear the great music from Persia, and from China and Japan, and of course from Java and gamelan music, and took all this music and he incorporated it into his sound, which was a classical Western style, and you could hear that from the difference between Debussy's very early music as a student and then his music after hearing all these wild sounds for him. I mean, they were new. They were really new. They hadn't been recorded on all these wonderful records that are out there. And there's a story which is fun that I love, that his teachers, his students, his colleagues asked him why he was straying from the path of Western classical music, from the heroes of Beethoven and Brahms. And in his words, he said, "Pleasure is the law."
Yeah, well, could that be considered as the beginning of the probably the Romantic era as well, as far as music is concerned? Because when you're saying Debussy in 1893 all the way to the World's Fair, and I was trying to imagine that date, but it wouldn't come up to me. Somebody who knows Jeopardy probably. When was the World's Fair in Paris? Was it 1812? I don't remember.
No, it was much closer to the time that Debussy wrote the quartet. Actually, I think the exposition, Eric, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was sometime around 1889.
I believe that's exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and the string quartet was written in 1893, and just, I guess, in response to your question, Debussy definitely ushered in a kind of era in music, but I think what I feel that he invited in the world of music was the global era.
Global music era.
Yeah, I mean, he really opened up the platform. He was the one who said, in this classical tradition that we've inherited, and it's a great tradition, and nobody argues that it's not a great tradition, but he also said, we also have all these other great world music traditions out there, and I think, just to also add to what Eric said before about, all of which is 100% true about his take on music in his time. The thing that I find so wonderful about Debussy was that he looked also outside of the realm of music for inspiration. And I'm looking at your show, in your past programs, you have people arranged from like Noam Chomsky to Omar Sosa on your program, and I think Debussy was kind of this kind of person. He would have listened to your show because I think he had wide-ranging interests. I mean, he was very interested in the poets of his time. He worked with Diaghilev, the great ballet russe impresario, and he met Charlie Chaplin. He just had this kind of amazing life and an amazing time, and it really all filtered in through his music. And so for that reason and many more, he's kind of, we were drawn to him.
So because of that then, you were drawn to him, and how did you start thinking about, a string quartet? How it all started, yes.
Yeah.
The quartet,
well,
how did you?
Nick, why don't you jump in there?
Okay. Well, I would say it's basically true that along the way, most string players have the dream of playing in a string quartet. Mm-hmm. I know it's true for myself, and I think it's true of my colleagues. Maybe the number one reason there is that the music that's written for string quartet is so incredibly great, going back all the way to Haydn, Mozart, but then through Beethoven and Brahms and Debussy and Bartók, and then of course the music of our time. It's just such a rich tradition, and it's really a very direct form of communication between the musicians and audience, and we love that, But I would say, on speaking for myself, there have been so many great quartets out there. I wanted to do something on my own